Had a baby fair, and it's such a nice thing to do. We thought that this morning that we'd share with you some of the tales of the early days of the hospital. We have the original storks here, the delivering staff. Dr. Lutwitty is over here. I don't remember who was chief of OB at the time, but I guess you shared, huh?
We shared. We didn't have an OB.
Dr. Lutwitty and Dr. Martz is next to him. This is Dr. Genevieve. I was a baby nurse in those days. That was 1969. We opened April the 10th, and when was that first baby? When did you deliver those twins?
He had the twins.
I don't remember what day it was.
It was a day or two after we opened.
I could have delivered my gal, but because he had twins, I let him be first.
Come on. He's still shoveling it.
First one. That's because you were twins.
Yeah. You were a gentleman, and let Dr. Genevieve deliver the twins.
Twins, because that voted good for the hospital.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good start.
These three men worked so hard getting our hospital here that I think that you probably thought that the public deserved that, huh? Because they supported us. I don't think theatrics were what you had in mind, but you know, those babies turned out to be fine boys. But I think we all felt like in those early days, it was almost a test. Didn't you feel like that? We had really unusual things that first year that we were here, and we started out with that first delivery.
Started out with a bang, that's all.
That's right, we sure did.
We used to have to run to Farmington and to Perryville. I know I checked a baby of Dr. Genevieve's, a gal who was pregnant, and she was just about ready. I didn't think she'd make it to the hospital, but I think Karen delivered her for you one day. I can't remember.
Perryville you're talking about.
Can't remember who she was.
When we were going to
Perryville, right.
You know, there had to be a lot of collaboration there, didn't there?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of running up and down. This was a dream when we got this place.
Yeah.
It sure saved a lot of running around at nighttime.
I offered to deliver her in the office, but she said no, she wanted you to do it.
Yeah. So she went
And
to
then you
Perryville.
didn't get there.
So how many babies do you think you delivered a year when you were having to go to Perryville?
A year? Oh,
A year.
I don't know.
When you were going to Perryville?
Golly, I don't know. Children.
More than 100?
children.
No,
about 20 a month.
About 20 a month.
I wasn't doing that.
And
Joe was.
driving to Perryville for
Yes.
that?
I went to Perryville sometimes twice in the same night.
Yeah.
Believe me, I'd get home and my wife would say, you just had a call, you have to go back.
Goodness. And Dr. Martz, you drove to Farmington. You delivered at Farmington. How many do you think you delivered a month?
A month?
Yeah.
No,
Or a year? Who knows? Several trips, though, in a month's time.
One day, them in the middle of the night, I was covered for Dr. Stanfield, and I got home and had to go back out and delivered one in the hospital and one in his office.
Goodness.
And that's what Dr. Glick and I did. We delivered babies in the office. My wife was the baby nurse.
Yes. She told me that whenever I phoned and invited you.
Huh?
She told me that whenever I phoned to invite you to this reminisce today.
Yeah, she loved that part of it.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. What were
One
you
day,
gonna
Dr. Luckley and I sat down, we were dealing with some numbers, and we wondered how many babies we'd delivered. And just out of a bolt, we decided that we'd probably replace this county.
We did.
You probably did.
We did.
Because, you know, families were bigger then.
They were.
I still got all the OB cards.
Have you really?
Do you?
Yeah, we had little 5x7 cards.
That was all your records, yeah.
Was our record.
Isn't
Just a
that
little
something?
card.
You counted them. I had counted like 3,500 or something.
Wow.
At that time.
Wow.
But it was fun.
Yes.
That was a great part of the practice.
Oh yes, I enjoyed OB more than any other part of it. I was up here one night and I had 3 mamas going at once. One delivery room to the other one.
I remember one of those nights, whenever we were going from one delivery room to the other. It didn't happen often, but occasionally. And if you would have had to drive for that, which I'm sure you did in some of the days before. And we have Jeanette over here, who was on the receiving end down in Perryville, and the first OB supervisor here at St. Genevieve Hospital. So she can tell more tales than I can about the need for the hospital, or some of the bare misses or the babies that were born in St. Mary's on their way to Perryville from St. Genevieve. I know that would have happened to me. If we would not have had the hospital here, I would not have been able to make it to the hospital. And it was not because I was being heroic and staying home very long. I grant you, I would not have, that would not have been my choice, but it would have happened. I would not have made it to Perryville most of the
Before
time.
we had the hospital, I used to send my,
Were you at the end waiting for Dr. Lookwood and Genevieve in Perryville before we opened?
Definitely. Calling from a busy office, and probably a lot of people sat in that office and waited when they went down to Perryville and delivered a baby and came back and got called again and et cetera. And it was indeed day, night, evening. It seems like babies are more delivered in the day than they were back in those days. It seemed like more babies were born in the evening
Yes.
and
Well, you know, I thought
night.
when I'd get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd say, gee, another one in the middle of the night, you know. And after that, I started keeping track. And I took a survey, and I found there weren't any more born at night than there were in the day. It's just, they were the ones that you thought about because you had to get up out of sleep.
Isn't that the
Times,
truth?
you know. But there were just as many born through the day.
You know, something I wonder about, though, I wonder what happened, how the babies made that were delivered on the way.
You wondered how those babies were?
Yeah, how they made out, you know, we really didn't keep records.
No.
of that.
No.
But Jerry, you had one in a tornado.
I had one
Out in Burr.
Did you really?
That was funny, because it wasn't funny, it was scary.
That you delivered there?
Yeah, it was
Whereabouts was it?
on the way
Yeah,
down.
on the way to Perry
Down
County.
Burr, there was a big barn that got blown down, went across the road, and I followed the gentleman down with his wife. And when I got to a certain area, they had pulled off to the side of the road, so I stopped. They couldn't go any further, and I got out in a ditch with water up around my knees, I think, and we delivered her there on the road. There in a car, you know, he just opened the back door and delivered the baby. So then we bundled the baby up and I said, you gotta get her to the hospital. And he said, well, there's a barn all across the highway, there's a big truck out there. So we decided, well, we'll just take off and go across the farmer's field to get to the hospital. Forget we were concerned about the baby. Yeah, we did. So I remember that rumble of the tin that was on the barn.
That you drove over?
Drove over.
Oh, my. Oh, my.
We got the baby to the
I was going to say,
hospital.
did it all turn
Yeah,
out well?
It was fine. There were several of them that were interesting on the way.
one at Miller's Switch.
Yeah.
And they asked me what they should call the baby, and I told them Miller's Switch.
But you're not sure they did.
And I stopped at the railroad track and ran around and delivered the baby, wrapped it up, my wife slipped and put it in the gal's lap, and away we went.
To the hospital.
I was traveling pretty fast.
I bet you were. I think that probably happened a lot of times, and you still ended up delivering some, didn't you, Nan?
Right. I think too that, well, you know, it's been said many times that the twins were the first babies born here at the hospital. And really, when you think about it, the fact that we had had no deliveries, of course, we thought we were ready and everything. And if I remember correctly, everything went very smoothly that day. It was, we had made sure we had plenty of nurses and everything, and to wait on Dr. DeGeneva hand and foot, because we did that back in those days, Dr. Bruno. We waited on the doctor's hand and foot and everything went fine. Who the next delivery was after that, I really can't remember.
Well, Dr. Martz can tell you.
That was the second delivery.
Okay.
And mine were in the hospital, and I told her just don't push or anything. This was Gritzmacher.
Well, it really should have been Dr. DeGeneva, because I can remember in the latter part of March, Dr. DeGeneva walking in the director of nurse's office and saying, when is this place going to open up? And she said, when we're ready. And he said that was like waiting to have enough money to get married. You'll never get married, and we'll never open this place up and everything. So we picked we said, I think that was 3 weeks later, we'd open on April the,
8th, 1969.
the 9th or the 10th. I
68.
think. Because
April 8th, 68.
No, 69.
we wanted those twins delivered here. If we weren't ready, I believe they were going to be delivered at Perryville. So that's basically what was then the beginning of a very, very busy OB practice and everything that all of us worked at. In those days, nurses, you hired a nurse and you basically, they started out on med surg, but you told them that they'd be rotating through all areas and that they'd learn OB. In fact, when I had said that I indeed was going to get married and move back to the country, one of the nurses told me, well, you better learn something more than medicine because they're going to rotate you through everything, and indeed that's what they did. I went and started working in Perryville in 1965, and I had worked part-time at the old St. Anthony's on off of Grand Avenue. There's now a Schnucks store, I think, there, but that's where I learned OB. And I did OB and ER and med surg at Perryville, and then when this place opened, basically kind of did the same thing here. Now, nurses don't like to do that, and nurses really don't do that anymore.
More specialized.
They become more specialized in everything.
Now, Jeanette, following up on that line, she was my mentor, and she taught me OB when we opened here at St. John, because I didn't do OB nursing at Perryville Hospital. I was a baby nurse, as I said, and I was still getting my feet wet with general medical, surgical, and emergency room patients, so I only learned OB here. And first she mentored me in the house, and then after that I worked midnights because I was very pregnant by that time. And she was just a call away, so most of the time I could handle it with just a phone call to her, but sometimes she had to come across town. And then, if we did have an unusual circumstance, like a preterm baby or something of that sort, then Roseanne came into play. And Roseanne Herzog is over here to my far left. She was the county health office at the time. One nurse and one secretary.
That's right.
I don't even know if she was full-time, but at any rate, you know, Roseanne had many, many things on her docket or in her job description, and one of them, according to the state of Missouri at that time, was that she was the attendant whenever any baby needed to be transferred to St. Louis or a tertiary care center. And I remember that being written into our policy and procedures, and you all probably remember that too. If at the earliest possible moment that we knew we were going to have a baby that probably would be transferred, we were to call Roseanne at home, because a lot of times she was day or night is right, and she would come over here and meet the baby and the ambulance here. And in those days, of course, we did not have an ambulance service. Remember that the mortuaries provided the ambulance service. So, you know, we'd ask the family what their choice was, and we'd call that ambulance. They would meet Roseanne and the baby here, and off they'd go to St. Louis. And of course, those were in the early days before 55 was here too. So, you know, it was Highway 61 travel at that point in time. So Roseanne can tell some stories about that.
Yeah.
How about the time you broke down, Roseanne?
Huh?
How about that time you broke down on the highway?
Well, I'd rather not talk about that. You know, nowadays, I don't know if I would do that because these two little old men came by and took us, the baby, into St. Louis to the hospital. I don't think I'd take that chance anymore, but we did those days.
What happened was, as they were going north on the highway, the ambulance became overheated or something. It had some kind of mechanical problem, and in fact, they had to stop. And smoke coming out from under the hood and all, and Roseanne was frantic with her baby there. And remember, we didn't have transport incubators.
No,
that little
it was
case.
just these little boxes that you heated with hot water bottles is what we
They
had.
looked like little tin boxes. They were about this long and about this tall, and they had a two clear panels at the top that you could see the baby through and slide open, I believe, so you could get in to take care of them. And it was heated with 6 hot water bottles because that was also in the procedure.
That's right.
We called Roseanne and filled the hot water bottles to warm up the little transport incubator, and off she went. So she had her baby in the little transporter and was frantic to get to the hospital because it was a preemie baby. And so she got out and waved down these two fellows on the highway and asked them if they knew the way to Cardinal Glennon. Isn't that right, Roseanne?
We had to tell them how to get there.
They didn't know the way. So Roseanne gave them instructions and off they went. And did the baby do well, Roseanne?
Well, yeah, and the baby survived.
You know, and most of those babies, I think, not only survived but did well. So, you know, it was good that we were able to do that, but I'm sure some babies that we can save now and save in better condition.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
Maybe just didn't make it to get to that point that we could transfer them. But when you think back on it, actually, we did a pretty good job with what we had to
Well, I guess
offer.
with the Lord's help, we
That's
did.
right. And I think, you know, the hospital was a big step in that direction, you know, because
Yes, it was.
before that, you were a little farther from St. Louis and a little farther from the home, and we didn't have any way to,
We didn't have a 4-lane highway either, with this 2-lane, and if you got behind a big old truck or something, you kind of prayed that you could get around. And it was
administrator, that's the right word. So, you know, those were the beginnings of, I guess, the core of healthcare in St. John County, don't you think? It was, I asked the girls to total up how many babies we had here at the hospital over the years, and it was 3,877. And that doesn't count 1999's babies. So we're getting close to 4,000 now, and the peak year, it looks like, was 1980 with 178 babies. But I remember it was rare the time. I would drive to work in the morning, maybe in the evening too, but I remember light enough so that you could see, and you doctors used to park outside the emergency room entrance, and usually the reason you were here in the very early morning like that, when we came at 6:30, was because you had a mother in labor. And it was rare the time you would drive up to the hospital that one of your cars, if not several or all of you, wouldn't be here. I mean, I think about that now. Of course, families were bigger then, and I guess we did have more babies at the time, but we had full nurseries. You know, the nursery had 8 bassinets, and any number of the people that work here, Annette, you're probably one of them, that can tell that just whenever the last bed, or there would have been overflow, the 9th baby would have come, but then one went home. So, you know, we usually made it then with that.
Yeah, but you stayed in the hospital with a normal delivery for 5 days.
Yeah.
If it was a C-section, you stayed
A week.
2
a
weeks.
week, if not longer sometimes, depending. Now,
Until the insurance companies start telling us how to practice medicine,
That's right.
Yeah.
telling them to go home soon.
And you know, Dr. Ludwig, we struggle with that even
I
now
know.
because it's difficult. I having been a mom myself, you know, I think about, I just don't know whether I could have done it at the end of 2 days. And the teaching and support you got from the personnel here at the hospital, some of the older nursery ladies are here too, and they can vouch for that. I don't know what I would have done without that. And you know, I had my own parents here, my extended family for a support system, but a lot of mothers don't have that these days, right here in the community.
But you know, we had to talk a lot of mothers into staying.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
They would argue with us, no, I want to go home, you know, and I'd say, no, just stay here. You'll be happy when you get home that you'll have this extra rest.
And you
we
know,
always said that the baby needed to be observed
that's
a
right.
period of time.
Yes.
When we got to sending them home the next day, they got upset because, you know, there's nobody there at home to take care of the baby.
That's
That's right. And you know, there are just some things as a new mom or a young mom, you don't have any idea that you're going to encounter until you get home, you know, and I always appreciated that advice that you gave because it was true. It was true. I mean, I needed that time I had in the hospital, and I think after my first baby, I appreciated that, and I never argued with you about staying those 5 days. Oh, those were the days. You know, we've had lots and lots of experiences, and I think some of the emergency things that we had, and we managed pretty well with them, but you learn to respect that you have to expect the unexpected? Would that be the way to put it?
Always. Always that. It was not all heavy duty. Some of it was fun.
Yes, it was.
It was, when the hospital was first new, when it was bright in our eyes and bright in everybody's eyes, there was a sense of exhilaration to
That's right.
for all of us.
Yes, there
And
was.
it was fun. It really was an enjoyable place to work. Yeah, a lot of hours spent here in the middle of the night, sleeping on the go-kart or trying to get some rest in what was then the doctor's lounge, which is now something else entirely. But, you know, we used to spend a lot of hours over here,
A lot of hours.
a lot of hours.
I delivered my first grandchild there.
Did you really?
Yang was out of town gambling.
It wasn't intentional.
I delivered my daughter. I told her to go out to the hospital and take care of her. And my wife kicked me out of bed. I went up there, and she was really complete. I didn't have any time. We just did it.
Well,
I had a chance to deliver the second one over at Farmington, but I turned it down.
you know, as we prepared for the baby fair, you know, we looked back to see how many second-generation babies have been delivered now, since you brought that up, Dr. Martz, and that we could identify. I'm sure there are more, but we could positively identify that there were 64 second-generation babies delivered here. Meaning that, like, my children were born here, and I have one grandchild, and that grandchild was born here. So, you know, it was a child of a child delivered here. So, you know, we'll see more and more of that now, and that was kind of fun to gather those
I went
pictures
to
up.
my granddaughter's graduation here, and the first 2 rows were kids I had delivered.
Isn't that something? Well, when you say you replaced the county, literally you did, not just in numbers, but in, you know, in actual faces that you can see now. It doesn't seem like those kids should be old enough to be graduating, but of course, it's been a while since we did that. I agree with you, Dr. DeGeneva. It was
It was fun. It was enjoyable.
an
Well, let me
experience.
put it this way. I wouldn't have missed it for
No,
anything.
no, me either.
It's always pleasant to go out, like I go out to Grandpa's, somebody says, "Hello, Dr. Martha." Was out there one day and nobody recognized me. Nobody spoke to me.
Oh,
And I love going to Grandpa's and see old faces I haven't seen for years, you know, and then when the day goes by that I don't.
that somebody doesn't recognize you, it's unusual. Well, you doctors spent so many years in the public eye. You know, I mean, you took care of us for years.
45.
Yeah,
I
you know,
figured.
I would imagine it would be unusual for you to go out in this community and not see somebody that, well, I don't know. It would be almost impossible.
'Cause I retired at 85, and then when I spent time in the emergency room working for Raju, and just for the heck of it, was fun.
That's because you guys are people persons.
Yeah, we enjoyed our life, our profession.
Well, that's good to
I
hear.
think you said the right word.
Huh?
We enjoyed our life.
Yes,
Yeah.
we enjoyed it. That's something I can't see today. Your private doctor, but he only can do one thing. He doesn't do deliveries. He doesn't do any minor surgeries. He just talks to them in the office. But he doesn't have very many hospital privileges.
Well, and you know, we've talked about, you know, now we're back to the idea of primary care physicians again, and that's what family practice doctors were all those years, you know. I mean, Dr. Lovegood delivered most of my babies, and then he took care of the baby after the pregnancy was over. He knew what had happened with me through the labor. He knew what my health was before that because he was my provider. And so it's like we've rediscovered something new with this primary care physician, and I think that's old stuff, you know.
An old GP.
Yeah, that's right.
Retread GP.
Yeah.
Done it for years.
Yes, and it was a good way to practice medicine too. It was.
Yeah, there were times where you were called from the emergency room to go deliver a baby or
Yeah.
vice versa. You know, you'd be scrubbing for surgery and have to stop to do something in the emergency room.
And reprioritize, huh?
Go back to surgery and scrub up again, and then you have to leave surgery on occasion to go to the delivery room. So it was a good life. It was a life in which all parts of it were involved, from the emergency room to the surgeries to the medical problems that occurred to the obstetrical department. So we were just GPs, just general practitioners, and we did it all. We did it all.
And I'm not sure that we're so much better off for being specialized today. It's just that whenever you talk about the differences in the testing that we did earlier and the equipment you have available.
That threw me when I was listening to all that. I wouldn't be able to deliver a baby today.
Yes, you would too. Come out
I
the
could
same
catch
way.
That's true. But I mean, I would know nothing about all this information material that comes in.
And how long has it been since you retired, Dr. DeGen? About what time span are we talking about?
When did I retire? 10 years ago, I guess?
Yeah, okay.
Something.
I would think. Well,
We stopped doing deliveries before that,
Yeah,
and that's where the
right.
money
We
comes from.
stopped delivering,
Actually,
78.
that's right, when
Because-
Dr. Yang came.
and then
Yeah, about that time, right?
Yes, it was.
who was the nurse, and she's still working here. I delivered her baby.
Mary Ellen Franklin.
Yes, oh yes, she told me that.
She'd asked me, we had quit delivering, and she begged me to deliver.
Yes.
I said, well, you can't say anything to anybody now, and you are a nurse and you're special, as far as I was concerned. I always thought nurses were special. And we delivered it, but that was the last one. That was 78.
Yes, that's right, Dr. Ludwig. But
Yeah.
Mary Ellen just said that last
Yeah.
night. Yes.
And she just told me how old that baby was, and I couldn't believe it.
She's a beautiful girl. I think she's a senior in college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's been a long time.
Yeah. She's,
You sure they come out the same way?
yeah, they do, Dr. Agenda, they do.
The whole practice of medicine, you talked about that. It was fun, it was enjoyable, it was part of our life. I always say that was my life.
I think your
24 hours a day.
wives
Yeah.
married, when they married,
Yes,
that's even true now, they marry physicians, they marry medicine because
well, I
of
always
that.
told my wife she was an angel because she followed me in Kentucky, way down in the Appalachian area. I was down there for a while, and then we came here, and when she came here, it was during the flood time. It was 1950 when we first came to St. Mary's, and it was flood time, and the big field was flooded. And she said, as we were driving along the big field to go to St. Mary's, she told me, she said, Joe, you didn't tell me that this was on a lake. I said, oh God, no, it isn't. Flood water. I always thought that was funny.
Isn't that something? It looks like a lake, whatever the river is, doesn't it?
Particularly if the road isn't
That's right.
over the road or anything.
That's right, that's right.
Any time we had to drive along that as the floodwaters came up.
Oh, yeah, I got my wheels wet much in St. Mary's going around the curve.
Right.
That was the part that always got wet
I
first.
didn't have that trouble, fellas. I went over.
You went over the hill?
He went overland.
Higher.
Oh, my.
I think too, if you think about when your kids were born, and I think of my own two children that were born. One was born on a Saturday evening, where most of us are either out with our families or where it's considered an evening at home with our families. And the other one was born on doctor's day off. So, instead of having a day off, he spent it down at Perryville, although it really wasn't a day off because he was supposed to go work at the Bloodmobile. Back in those days, in order to run a Bloodmobile, you had to have a physician in the building while the Bloodmobile was going. He did tell me he'd rather be down there delivering the baby than doing the Bloodmobile. So. And everything. And I think if you think about it, you just think back when your children were born and everything, they never come at convenient times.
No, I think I have 6 children, and everyone but one was born on the weekend. So I wasn't very nice to you, but at least I didn't interrupt your office hours. And one time, One time, it was after Dr. Genevieve and you and Dr. Key, I suppose, were covering for each other. That was the first time you started to do that. Up until
Yes.
then, you delivered all your own babies, no matter when. So to give yourselves just a little bit of relief, because by that time, the
We were
hospital
beginning
was
to
growing.
turn.
What that was we were dealing with a younger physician, if you remember.
Yes, I do.
And he
Oh.
didn't like the idea of being on call every night, delivering
Oh,
babies
is that
all the
how it
time.
happened?
So we had to go to the rotation system to keep him happy.
Well, you delivered number 5 for me.
I did.
Yes, you did. And you stayed. You were here. And I called. And because of my history of short labors, you stayed to see. I suppose you thought rather than go home and have to
Yeah.
come right back. So you stayed, and I appreciated that because it was a quickie.
Okay.
And then.
Came out the same way.
Did, sure did. And I was pretty sure by that time that's what was going to happen.
You know, the other thing, OB was up on the, well, it was on this level, but this wasn't added. And you had, in the labor room, you could look out, and none of these houses were here. And you could look up, particularly to Dr. DeGenevive's house, and see if he was at
If I was in
home.
the home. in the
If he was
driveway.
at home, if the car was in the driveway, well, that saved you a phone call. You could call directly there. If his car wasn't in the driveway, then you only assumed he was at the office then. So we kept track of them, pretty tight rein on them and everything,
That's because
where they were.
we needed them often. You know, Jeanette went from being OB supervisor to OR supervisor, and as you said, if you weren't needed in one department, you were needed in the other, and we were very busy in those days. And we're busy now too, but there weren't as many of you to take care of people. And we had more people in the hospital because of the way medicine was practiced too. So we were busy. Roseanne, do you have any more remembrances?
Oh, not too many more.
Whenever,
These trips to St. Louis, I mean, with these little bitty babies, it seemed like a long, long way. But luckily, we only lost one, and that was after it was in the hospital. So we were really fortunate in not losing any on the way.
I was going to say something about that. We had some fantastic, and they weren't all nurses either. You nurses, but then there were nurses aides.
Yes.
And the people that worked in the nursery really were dedicated. And they would do tremendous things for that baby. And I attribute many of the babies that went up and went on to childhood and into maturity, that they were really saved by the care that they had. This happened perhaps more in Perryville, because they were farther from St. Louis, and we thought twice before we would say, hey, we got to ship this baby or something, you know. But I've often thought of that, of all the care. They nurse those babies. I say nurse, I meant just giving nursing care.
yes.
But
Well, we gavaged
Yeah,
babies
right.
and.
Well, we
and-
kept the preemie babies.
Right.
That was a procedure
that was one of the things, right.
And we even
We
had, even
we had
here
babies
at
that
the
weighed 2
beginning.
pounds that we brought through.
Right, and even here at the very beginning, we didn't ship. If prematurity was the only, relevant problem, we kept those babies here and gavaged those babies. We even transfused,
We used to do exchange
Exchange
transfusions on the orange factor transfusions here.
I'm sure Dr. Bruno's just shuddering and thinking, oh, no, we're not.
We did. We exchanged babies, did complete exchanges on them.
I remember that.
And everything. And now, a preemie infant, or if we have to transfer an infant, they don't even rely on our local ambulance service anymore. They actually either fly down or they send a team down. They send their own ambulance thing. I spent, earlier this year, spent quite a bit of time at Children's Hospital, and they've got like 6 transport units just lined up off of their ER.
Waiting for phone calls.
And with teams ready to go out to pick up these babies and everything. Back in those days, we had to, like I say, rely upon Roseanne. And if once in a while Roseanne couldn't make it, then one of our own nurses would go in the ambulance with the little tin box. We tried to get
Yes.
the tin box back. It went back to the state, did it not?
Yes, it
I
Yeah,
don't know where it
that's
is.
what we were told, but, you know, if you talk about a piece of antique equipment, that is definitely, but it
But it
certainly,
did the job.
it did the job, right.
It really
And
did.
so much cheaper.
Exactly, right.
What do preemies cost now? 60, 70, 80, $100,000?
You're off by a factor of 10.
Huh?
You're off by a
I
factor
got
of 10.
my
I had some babies with
hospital
over $1
bill
million.
and my delivery when I was born. $60.
$60 for your delivery, huh?
$60, $15 for the
Circumcision.
circumcision.
Quite a change.
It was $15 for the operating room, that's what it was. But $60 was what it cost my mother.
Isn't that amazing?
You want to talk about something amazing? What were you delivering patients for in the 50s?
$55. Then it went to $75.
$5 for the circumcision.
$5 for the circumcision,
Yeah.
and that included the prenatal care,
And postnatal.
postnatal care, the circumcision, 5 days in the hospital,
And the delivery.
and the delivery.
Night or day.
$155.
Yeah.
That was the sum and substance of the doctor's fee.
Because I remember you delivered the girls, it was $90. If they'd have been boys, it'd have been $100, because you charged $10 for circumcision.
Times have changed, haven't
Started
they?
out in practice at $2 an office visit, right, Jerry?
Mhm.
I don't know what yours were.
I don't think we charge anything for office visits to begin with.
Oh, no, not for obstetrical patients.
No.
Not for OBs.
Oh, no.
That was included in the OB fee.
Yeah.
That's called a global fee now.
We always
They
saw
have
that
a
they got a
fancy
shot
term
in
for
medicine, see, so that way we could get some money. Then you all started charging the office call. He did. And then we all chipped in. Yeah.
Well, you know, we've had,
Do our people here have any questions
yes,
for us?
we have Mr. Shelley, who was our original administrator
Yes,
here.
and a very good one.
Yes. We, you know, those were the 1960s, and we were kind of service-minded back then, and so happy to have our own hospital, and it was, we were on a mission. It was very inspiring. He was a good leader.
Every nook in this whole county,
Never go
didn't
out
we?
there.
Talking at night, talking
Zell.
about getting the hospital.
Roseanne is just saying that those of
Talking
them,
up here at school.
of the people that were in medicine at the time or in healthcare, since she was the county health nurse and these fellows were the physicians, they spoke to every group all over the county. Roseanne?
That's right.
Every little nook and cranny, she just
I
said.
really learned where to go in the county.
Where the county boundaries were.
I
did you?
sure did.
I remember being on the receiving end of that. You know, I remember people coming out, Dr. Ludwig, I know you were out at Ozora one time to speak at some parish meeting, you know, about the need for the hospital and, you know, the support that they were asking for as far as the tax bond issue was concerned and that sort of thing. And Roseanne, you were in on that. Now, I was in fact, whenever it was first proposed, I guess I was still in high school because I have a clipping. I think I won some sort of poster contest. I was just one of several people who did, you know, and that was the preparation for
Yeah, I
it.
think it was that long ago.
Yeah, I think it was. I just came across the newspaper clipping. It's pretty yellow, Roseanne.
It's interesting to see, I didn't realize that the hospital auxiliary
Yes.
actually was formed in 1964.
Oh, I didn't
So
know
they're
that.
celebrating their 35 years next week. There's a dinner. They're having their bi-monthly dinner that they have and everything. But they formed in 1964, and they played an important role in, you know, putting together the hospital and promoting the fact that we needed a hospital and everything.
They scrubbed this hospital out.
So did a lot of the nurse aides.
Yes.
Times. That we
Yes.
have two of them over here who are
The
not
nurse
here.
aides, before the hospital opened, a lot of them scrubbed floors and stuff like that, and then went home and fed their families, and then came back in and went down to Citizens Electric, where primarily Sharon did classes, the nurse aide classes and everything, to get them ready for when the hospital opened.
Actually, I think it was the majority of us, of we St. Genevieve nurses who were going to be transferring up here to our own new hospital, you know, and that gave classes. And you know, you have to remember, none of our, and this is a tribute to our nurse aides too, none of them had any experience. You know, I mean, we didn't have a hospital at that time. There was no such thing as a volunteer organization at Perry County Hospital, since that was our closest neighbor. And so, you know, we practiced giving bed baths or taught how to give bed baths and so forth. Of course, it was all a dry run. It was all mimicking. It was the positioning and how to turn a person and get them out of bed safely, and the tubing, but it was all demonstrated. You know, we didn't actually have the patients and we didn't have the facilities. So when we first opened the hospital then, before it opened to the public, when we first got equipment, furniture in the rooms, we opened up room 100, 102, 104, and 106 and set up beds, and I was the patient. Dr. Luckwoody, I was 6 months pregnant with my first child when we opened, and I was the patient that they were giving the bath to, and we did use water then. And so I was lying flat in the bed, and it was spring, and I'm an allergic person, and I'm getting big, you know, and my head was all stopped up, and all the girls gave me, do you remember that, Lenore? Gave me a bath. They returned, demonstrated the bath. Then they moved to the next room where they re-demonstrated the use of tubing, for example, or how to handle Foley catheters or whatever. But then when the first patients came, and Dr. Martz, I think you had the first admission, when the first patients came to the hospital, the girls, I refer to them as the nurse aides, had never actually seen that tubing inside a real patient. So at the beginning of every shift, the nurse would go down and say, now, you know, discreetly, now this is what the Foley catheter is going to look like in a person, and you have to be careful about taping it safely and not raising it above the level of the patient's body and so forth as you work with it. So it was quite an endeavor. It was really a cooperative effort in those days, and that's why we were so close to each other, I think, because you were here day and night, and we had
Working out your problems.
and everything was a new adventure. Yes, Lenore is saying, she was one of the original staff, she's in the audience with us, that we had fun doing it, and we did. We did. We enjoyed taking care of our patients and enjoyed working together. It was a good team effort.
Sharon, folks might be interested in knowing, they were talking about, you know, their ridiculously low charges for OB, and
Yes.
our semi-private room rates, and of course semi-private rooms is all we have.
That's
We don't have
right.
one private room.
One.
Our semi-private room rate when we opened was $33 a day.
$33 a day.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
And we had calculated that out of total ignorance, and, you know, we went into this thing, the old sister, Isadore up at St. John's used to tell us, there's no courage that's equal to the courage of ignorance. And we proved that, but as we were preparing to open up and trying to establish some kind of charges, we calculated that $33 a day per bed, if we had the beds 85% occupied, would cover the salaries of the employees, and that's how we arrived at $33 a day, expecting lab and x-ray and other ancillaries. At that time, there weren't near the ancillary services that you have today.
That's right.
But it was, the doctor said it was fun. They were dedicated. It was their life, and without them, it wouldn't have happened. We have to acknowledge Roseanne. She had her little office, she and Judy, down in the little building next to the courthouse. I don't know what it is now, but it was barely big enough for them. But I was hired about 6 months before the hospital was completed, And so she shared her office with Sharon Warner and I, Sharon Figgy now. And Sharon actually was the first employee of the hospital. We hired her as a part-time secretary, and I don't think she ever did work part-time. But it was great fun.
And then eventually, we invited Roseanne into the new building, and her office, you reciprocated the favor. And the county health office was downstairs in the lower level of the hospital here. So, you know, and even at that point, it was a nice collaborative arrangement because we could work with Roseanne and she with us, you know, since she was our transporting attendant, and some of us in turn helped her with school immunizations. Because in those days, you went to the school.
That's right.
There were large, huge campaigns
Throughout the county.
of children, yes, from the small parochial school my children went to the large public school and parochial school here in St. Genevieve. So, you know, it was the team effort that I think they're trying to reconstruct now in medicine. We had that naturally 30 years ago. And I think maybe our heart was in it a little bit more then because it was such a team effort. I don't mean our heart isn't in it now, because the reason I still do nursing and enjoy it every day and learn something every day of my life is because of the patients. You know, it's the patient care that makes the difference. You put up with the system as it changes because of the patients. And you know, when I have been a patient, I have been taken care of so well in this hospital by the people that work here too. And I really appreciate being able to have that hospital to count on to do
If you
that.
recall, this was the one big selling point that we had, was that we wanted someplace that would look after us when we grew old. And
That was good planning on your part.
This was the idea.
Guess what? We're old.
We're old. Yes. Yes, you can say that again.
The other thing that always was so neat is that you knew everybody working in the hospital too. And we knew everybody's first name almost. And
We did.
I go in the hospital now and I don't know anybody, you know, as I go in. The nurses aren't. I
Hurt
don't
your
even know the
feelings when they
nurses.
said, "What do you want?"
Who are you? What are you doing here?
Would you spell that, please?
Well, I'll tell you, it's been a fine adventure, and certainly a worthwhile one, I think, over the years, and we all feel that way, you know, no matter which direction we've come from here. And as the hospital celebrates its 30 years of babies, I really appreciate you coming to share with us, because this was the heart of the hospital, I think. You know, we wouldn't have had it if it wouldn't have been for you even ahead of me, because as I say, I was just a baby nurse then. I was doing my nurse's training at the time that you were doing the groundwork to get the hospital going, but I was fortunate enough to be, I suppose, almost the youngest nurse on the staff, not quite when we opened up. There were two who were a little younger than I. And so I've had my family here at this hospital. Most of my grandparents have died here. And my family and my current family are cared for here. So, you know, that's what the community hospital is about. And since I am the OB supervisor now, I especially appreciate the 3,877 babies that have been born here, and I hope that we'll be able to carry on that tradition. Thank you all for coming.